we've seen a lot of that incredibly odd reversal. And, well, it's very hard to know what to make of that, except that, well, the evidence is starkly in, isn't it? It's happening. RFK is an excellent example of that. Tulsi Gabbard, turfed by the Democrats. And then, the Trump administration is run by Democrats, essentially. The courageous Democrats who were turfed from their own party now run the United States under the guise of Republicans in conjunction with Trump.
Yeah.
Well, who's going to predict that? Well, I guess you think, well, the last won't be first. Yeah, I guess I guess they will.
How do I possibly do a Jordan Peterson interview in 10 minutes at the end of ARC, my last interview, your last interview? You're about to give the keynote. We got 10 minutes. How do we do this? What do we do?
Badly and quick, I guess.
What are you going to talk about in 10 minutes from now?
I'm going to talk about hardly anything. I'm going to talk about Noah, Moses, Abraham, and adventure. And hopefully I'm going to pull that off to some music. We'll see how that goes.
Are you going to be playing some music?
No, there's an orchestra.
I saw the orchestra. I could see a little Jordan Peterson conducting of something.
Yeah, I've got my cues.
This is a fine mess you've gotten yourself in.
That's for sure. That's for sure. That's the purpose of life, Dave, is to get yourself in fine messes. Oh, how's that going for you?
It's going pretty well, but
there you go.
But I don't know that it's going at the level you're going at.
Get the hell at it.
All right, I'm working on it.
You're not doing too bad.
No, I'm doing all right.
You're fired on at least 6 cylinders.
How many are there?
That's a good question. There's an infinite number of potential cylinders, unfortunately.
I like that. I like that. So I have to say that one of the things that's been most interesting about this conference compared to the one a year and a half ago is that one was the end of October of 23. It was right after October 7th. Yeah. And there was a feeling, despite all of the good ideas of the conference, there was a feeling of dread for everybody in the West. Like, is this really all falling apart? Yeah. Now it's a year and a half later, not even. And we're just weeks after a Trump presidency where there's a feeling of hope here. Yeah. And that's been making me think, boy, an awful lot can change in a year and a half. And that's probably, you can probably give me a biblical version of that.
Yeah, well, things fall quickly and they can rise quickly. And how do we make sense out of what's happened with Trump? Well, what would we might say about that? The last will be first. How about that? Who's head of NIH? Jay Bhattacharya.
Yes, not bad.
Right.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
From an epidemiologist whose career was threatened with serious cancellation, who was pilloried terribly. Now he's going to run the NIH by all appearances. And we've seen a lot of that incredibly odd reversal. And, well, it's very hard to know what to make of that, except that, well, the evidence is starkly in, isn't it? It's happening. RFK is an excellent example of that. Tulsi Gabbard, turfed by the Democrats. And then, the Trump administration is run by Democrats, essentially. The courageous Democrats who were turfed from their own party now run the United States under the guise of Republicans in conjunction with Trump. Yeah. Well, who's going to predict that? Well, I guess you think, well, the last won't be first. Yeah, I guess I guess they will.
So at your opening speech, you were basically giving the story of Passover. It was the story of Exodus, of the Jews leaving Egypt to go to the Promised Land. And you were talking about the, what did you call them? There were the 12 tribes, but there were the people that went in first. Yeah. What did you refer to them as?
Scouts of the future.
Scouts of the future.
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were talking about that seems to me to be some of these people that Trump has brought in. Trump sort of brought us all out of Egypt. And now he's sending the scouts to go look and figure out, what do you have to do? How do we do all of this? It really is beautiful when these stories can make some congruence.
Well, one of the interesting things about that story is the insistence that you have a moral obligation to be optimistic about the future. And the future is akin to the present. It will be occupied by many of the same people. It's rife with formidable and even apocalyptic challenges. And that's always the case. And the question then is, what's the appropriate moral attitude in the face, even truly, of a potential apocalypse? And the answer to that always is faith, courage, and the optimism that springs from faith and courage and that isn't naive. You're required to do that morally. That's, in some ways, that's even the defining characteristic of faith. And so what does that mean? It means what Caleb and Joshua do report to Moses when they're sent to Canaan to scout out the future. They say, well, it's a place of formidable challenge, but if we maintain our upward aim and our covenant with the divine, then there's no desert we can't make bloom. And I think that's right. I also think that's the right rejoinder to the Malthusians, even from a biological perspective. Their notion is it's a zero-sum game and we'll multiply till we consume all possible resources. And the rejoinder to that is human beings transform the idea of resource itself, and the future is a place of unlimited possibility if you maintain your upward aim. I think that's true. And so if it's true, you're called upon to be a forthright and optimistic scout of the future. And then you're the people who lead the lost to the promised land. And yes, that seems correct.
Do you feel that your life is actually completely congruent with what you just said there? Because that's what I was thinking when I was watching you give that speech. I've seen you do this a million times, and I'll see you do it a million more times, and I'll see you put order into the world. But you've done it. You are doing it by putting truth into the world. We met 10 years ago, and you were a little-known psychology professor, and I was a little-known podcaster. And look at what has happened here.
Yeah, well, completely congruent. That's it. That never happens, I would say, because the dimensions of congruence become more complex and the requirement for congruence becomes greater as you ascend, so to speak, as your obligations multiply. The price you pay for making a mistake increases, and the level of commitment that you have to bring to bear on the problems increases. And I don't think there's a limit to that. And so,
do you feel that? Do you feel that on a daily basis, or is it just
well, you know, the cost for mistakes multiplies, the amount of attention that you have to bring to bear increases because the cost of failure is higher and higher, and the standards become higher and higher. And so that congruence is a constant pursuit rather than a permanent attainment, and it's always in error. I mean, part of the reason you fortify yourself in relationship to that is to surround yourself with people who are also helpful and awake. You know, and I have a lot of good people on my team.
Yeah.
My wife is very helpful, my kids, my security staff, all the agents that work with me. You know, they're always reminding me and tapping me and making sure that everything's on track. And so far that's going well, but it's not like I would ever presume to assume that that's a fait accompli, right? It's like surfing. It's like surfing. There's a balance there, but you're still in the waves and you better watch the hell out.
Do you feel that there are threshold moments throughout that where you feel like, oh, well, now I've accomplished this or reached this level or something, and now I won't turn back in that sense, and now I can just grow from here? You know, that you'll just continually grow.
No, I wouldn't say I feel that. I think you have to maintain that underlying awareness of fragility. I think that's also part of gratitude. When things are going well, you have to remember how unlikely that is. You know, when Tammy has been accompanying me on stage a lot, and I don't know, she's probably opened 100 times now, and she's got to be a pretty good, maybe even a very good public speaker. And one of the enabling factors that make that possible is the cultivation of the right attitude towards the crowd. The music helps because we have a musician that plays before our lectures, but we're always trying to remind ourselves, and it's the same with this convention, this is very unlikely. You should never take it for granted, even for a second. It's the same when people approach you on the street and they want to talk to you. You know, you don't want to be dismissive. You don't want to ever be above that. Maybe you have to speed along because you have a priori commitment, but you want to not. Part of that religious humility is not taking anything for granted and realizing that there's 1,000 ways to fail. And success is unlikely. And if it happens to be visiting you now, you should be very, very cognizant of that and aware of it. People often believe that if a miracle occurred, they would now be a dedicated follower of the divine.
Right.
And that's not right.
Maybe for 5 minutes.
Yeah, maybe. What's right is that there's miracles happening in front of you all the time. And if you were awake, you'd see that. And maybe that would bolster your faith. And my sense is that if you're speaking to a multitude and they're not throwing stones at you, then you bloody well better be pretty happy about that, because it could be seriously otherwise. And so at the moment, there's many things happening in my life that are insanely positive. The Peterson Academy is flourishing. We have 50,000 students. My kids are doing well. The public response, as it is at ARC, is very positive, and there's sort of an unlimited horizon of opportunity in front of me. But by the same token, you're a fool to take any of that for granted, and you want to be awake and dancing the whole time. And it's also extremely entertaining, right? I mean, It's ridiculously engrossing and interesting. And
well, now I want to see what you're going to do with the orchestra up there. And I'm really glad, and just personally, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because this is incredible what you have built here. It is genuinely incredible, and I think it's changing the world for the better. And this is just a perfect example of everything you've been building. And now you got to go give a big speech. So this was the 10-minute Jordan Peterson. I didn't really have to do much.
It's good to see you, Dave. Thanks for coming to London, man, and thanks for your help.
Yeah.
Yep. Good to see you.
If you're looking for more eye-opening and worldly conversations, make sure to dive into our international playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a wide variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.